Hey, everybody. How's it going? I'm Zan Barksdale, and welcome back to another episode of Catching-101 TV. Got another great episode lined up for you today. Our guest is a current college coach. You've probably known him from Twitter, or maybe you've seen him at CatcherCON before, and they're in the middle of their season, so we're going to try to be respectful of his time. But with that said, we've got Tyler Shewmaker on, and excited to talk to you, Tyler, and looking forward to hearing what you have to say and what you guys are doing now.
Yeah, Zan, I appreciate you having me on, man. It's we've known each other for a while and got to know each other at CatcherCon and different things. So I appreciate you having me on, man. I watch these as you've had them and thankful to be on here on this one.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and you're right. And just so everybody knows, I mean, we've gone back. I guess we probably met, and it has to be over 10 years ago, I would think, when you were at Kentucky Wesleyan, and I've seen you kind of grow as a player and
Yep.
then into a coach, and your coaching career has really taken off. Why don't you go into a little bit more detail and just kind of tell everybody maybe where you started and how you got to where you are now? Because every time we have one of these, I send out a tweet and I ask people, hey, what would you like to know about, the guest? And a couple people mentioned, like, man, Tyler seems like he's done a really good job progressing in the coaching ranks. I'd love to know kind of a little bit more about his story. So if you don't mind, just kind of expand on that for us.
Yeah, so I played junior college baseball for a year and then went on to play at Kentucky Wesleyan College, was a Division II in Owensboro, Kentucky. And after I got done playing, I was lucky enough to get a call. I was moving out of my apartment, getting ready to go be a high school teacher, and lucky enough to get a call from our head coach there, Todd Lilpop, who said, "Hey, we got a spot open if you want to help coach," because he knew I wanted to get into coaching, and college coaching was something I kind of thought about, but man, I jumped on the opportunity, and I thought, well, I can get a teaching job later. Let's see where this leads right now. And fortunate enough for me, I jumped on there, had some good mentors that came on with me that year, and we won. And I think anytime you win and you can connect with players, you can move up the ranks a little bit higher. After that season, my first season at Kentucky Wesleyan as a coach, I went down in the Coastal Plain League in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Was able to coach there, and it was something that got me out of my comfort zone of being at Kentucky Wesleyan and being at a place that I played. So I was able to make more connections, meet new people. And while I was down here in North Carolina, I was calling around looking for pitchers. We needed some arms for the summer. It was getting late, and I go back to a connection that I made when I was in high school with a guy named Chris Marks, who was actually the pitching coach here at Campbell um, at that time. And he said, we don't have any arms for you. And just in the conversation out of the blue, I said, well, do you have any jobs open? and and he said, well, we have our director of ops job open. Would that be something you're interested in? And I hounded Coach Hare, who is the head coach here, for a month to try to get this job. And lucky enough, I don't say that I recommend hounding the head coach as much as I did, but I wasn't going to let him tell me no. And at that time, I was fortunate enough to get the job, and then from there, man, I've been bumped up each year. I went from director of ops to a volunteer role, and now in the catching coordinating role and kind of that paid assistant role, which is awesome. I love the recruiting aspect. I love being on the field, and that's kind of how I got to where I am. I think being loyal, having trust in you, the being able to the boss being able to trust you and give you some tasks and you get it done are great. But I think just having that go-getter mentality. I don't think having the yes sir mentality all the time is always beneficial. I think you have to bring something to the table. Anytime you get a new job or you get a new position or a new role, you got to say, hey, how can we do it different to better it? Not going against what the boss says, but how can we build on what he's doing, and bringing your own ideas in is something that's critical anytime you grow and get a new job.
Well, what you said about your job, I feel like it directly relates to coaching catchers. You have to think outside the box. You have to be persistent. I think for a long time, and things have started to change now in the past couple of years, but for a long time, catching and maybe a lot of other areas of baseball, but it was just, this is what we've always done. This is what we're going to continue to do. And a lot of the guys who are having success now that I see in the coaching world, they're guys who are I hate to say outside of the box, but they're forward thinking. They're able to think on their own. They're developing new ideas. They're testing them. And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but you absolutely have to be willing to try new things. So I definitely appreciate you sharing that. And one other thing before we kind of get into some catching specific stuff is I want to make sure everybody knows where to find you. And again, I know your primary role is as a college coach. You're not a private instructor, but I want to put your Twitter name on the screen so everybody can find you. But where can people find you online in case they're finding out about you for the first time and they want to dig into a little bit more to what you're doing?
Yeah, so I post quite a bit of stuff on Twitter, and my handle there is at Shewmaker43, and that's the same as my Instagram name, Shewmaker43. I use both of those platforms for some catching stuff and baseball stuff. I would say to find more catching specific stuff is on Twitter. I think more coaches are on there. I don't use Instagram as much for the baseball side. It's kind of more of a personal deal, but definitely think Twitter is the best way to reach me.
Well, definitely, like I said, I'll put that on the screen, make sure everybody knows where to find you. Because I do think you're a good follow, and your accounts are growing and people are following you and recognize what you're doing, which I think is always a good thing. I kind of want to dive in and talk some catching stuff. So, you and I'd say we talk fairly frequently and we see each other at CatcherCON, and we mentioned earlier, I know I consider you to be a more forward thinking guy and a guy who's trying new things. What would you say are a couple of the things or maybe the areas over the past, let's just say year or so, that you've experimented with or you're trying out and you're kind of, testing, or maybe you've already done the test and you found they're working for you?
I think some of the biggest one is obviously going to all knee down
Mhm.
here at Campbell is kind of experimenting with our guys and diving into, hey, we're going to be on a knee down not only just when runners aren't on base. We're going to be knee down when runners are on base, and kind of experimenting with both knee setups. Along with that, being able to optimize the strike zone to the umpire behind us has been something that we've kind of taken lead on this year, being able to use some of the umpire reports and saying, hey, maybe we can win more to the glove side, or maybe we can win more to the extension side, or this guy expands on left-handers away. Hey, how can we expand the plate as catchers? So being able to see that report and go off the guy that we have in conference 2 or 3 times has been hugely beneficial. And on the flip side of that, just kind of diving into more of how our guys learn and taking in, hey, what are they struggling, and guiding my direction off of that. So being able to chart different data and kind of bring in some of the technology that we have here at Campbell and guiding our training by that has been something that's been hugely beneficial and more individualized for each catcher as we get through the season and into the fall, or maybe he's a freshman going into sophomore year. Where was he good in his freshman year, and where was he bad? How can we build on that good, but increase the bad as well? So being able to teach off of data has been something that's been hugely beneficial for us here.
I think those are three excellent points, and I kind of want to talk a little bit more about each of them. But let's just go ahead and just kind of start where you started in the beginning. Transferring completely to a knee down stance. I know that's something you were trying probably as early as a couple of years ago. What do you think are some of the things that went into the decision to say, yeah, we're going to do it? We think it works. We believe in it, not just with nobody on base, but with runners on base as well. What were some of the things you observed that kind of led you to that conclusion?
Yeah, so one, I'm thankful that I have a boss in Justin Hare here that allowed me to do that. He was a catching guy. He caught in college. He did the catching here for a long time. And then having a guy like me come in and say, hey, we're going to transfer our whole catching philosophy and all the stances, that takes some guts. And him trusting me to do that was hugely beneficial. And having the trust of him behind me and doing that was beneficial. But I think the biggest points were being able to show, hey, we want to be able to block and throw out of our receiving stance, not receive out of our blocking and throwing stance. And being able to flip that mindset and say, hey, we're going to be able to do that even on a knee down, and trusting that and training it was hugely beneficial. And then, just just when we look at the numbers, and to be honest, this isn't a plug for you, but after the CatcherCON in 20, I guess that was 2019, that December 2018, when I was able to talk to some of those professional guys that were really on the cutting edge of it, and Tanner Swanston and those guys, and see how they were doing it. Hey, I just came back and dove right in. I think in the 2018 season we were more, some knee down, some on 2 feet, but then jumping right into it and saying, hey, we're going to go all out 100% knee down, because when we can optimize the strike zone and increase the probability of that being a strike, then we're better back here. And then building on that and flipping the mindset of saying, hey, we're going to be able to receive and block out of that stance, and training it that way instead of the other way, flipping the mindset, has been something that kind of took off here.
Well, you said one thing that really hit home with me. You said a lot of good things, but one thing really hit home, and it reminds me kind of my story. And I probably shared it before. So if people have listened to all these episodes, they may have heard me say it. But I feel like I was also fortunate where my head coach, Dan McDonald, when I was a young catching coach, he gave me complete autonomy to do whatever I want. He didn't micromanage me. He didn't say, hey, we have to do this, we have to do that. He put a lot of trust in me, which your head coach has done with you. And that's an awesome feeling as a young coach. And it allows you to experiment and try things. And it speaks a lot about you, but it also speaks a lot about him as well, and just the mindset of your program and what you guys are doing. So we talked about kind of the coaching aspect of it. Was there any resistance from the players, or any players hesitate to go, coach, I don't know if I can throw from a knee down stance. I don't know if I can block from a knee down stance. What was kind of their reaction as you start to go through that decision making?
Yeah. So I'm sure some people have seen the Bulls mentality here and kind of that catching culture that we've created. I know I've talked about it at CatcherCON and different places, but creating that culture and having 5 or 6 catchers in a college program has been something that we have to have, because you're one foul ball away from a guy being out or whatever. But I was fortunate whenever I took over as the catching guy here, and we did go all knee down. The leader, kind of the senior, the guy that is kind of the one that everybody looks up to, was all in on it. So when he was all in, majority of other guys, they follow, right? And that culture, that subculture of the main culture. Now I will say that there was some blowback whenever I said, hey, we're going to be able to block out of this stance. The throwing aspect was, they were like, oh, I just do this, I can hop up, or I can throw from a knee, or whatever. The coaching cues were pretty easy on that. The blocking aspect was not as easy. But I think one thing that kind of freed their mind of hey, is this a good block or is this a bad block, is understanding that, hey, a good block is just constituted by, did the runner advance? Mm-hmm. And being able to see that, hey, we're already on the knee. All we got to do is just turn the glove over and hopefully get the other knee down there. But if it doesn't get down there and we block on one knee, hey, it's still a good block if that runner doesn't advance. So trying to simplify it to that aspect of, did he advance or not? It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to go back to the plate every time. We just got to keep that guy at wherever he is, what base he's at. But on the flip side of that, also showing them and training, hey, I can get out laterally, maybe using a band or different work to say, hey, guiding them out there to say, this is how far I can actually get. I can get to my glove side. I can get to the extension side or whatever it may be, and kind of using those coaching cues of saying, hey, I'm going to pull you this way. Now I'm going to take this off and see if you can get it out there as far. And they're like, oh, I can push. I can use that knee to push, or I can use that toe that's up to push. So there was some blowback on the blocking side, but the receiving aspect they love, the throwing aspect they love. So I think we can build off what they like to do and say, hey, we're going to teach you to block out of that stance that you like.
And I love that. And I, this podcast, it gets a lot of different viewers. I mean, we get a lot of coaches and we got instructors, but we also get parents and we also get catchers as well. So I think a really important thing that you said that the catchers who are listening to this should take note of is, when your starting catcher just embraced it and took hold of it, everybody else followed. I think that's an important lesson for all the catchers out there, that, we're a leader and people look to you for guidance and people look to you for, direction, especially if we're trying something new, or if maybe coaches asking you to do something that you're not used to or you're uncomfortable with. But you can set the tone for, not just the catchers, but everybody else on the team as well. So I think that's a really good point. And I love hearing about the blocking. Well, now I know you're newer to the recruiting side of it, But knowing what you know and knowing how you like to coach guys, and we like guys that are in a knee down stance, does that affect how you recruit at all? Are you looking for guys that are more athletic, or does a knee down? Because I feel like there's two camps out there. Some people think to be in a knee down stance, you need to be more athletic. And then some people think that, hey, we have a semi unathletic catcher back there. We can put him in a knee down stance and we can kind of mask the unathleticism. So what are your thoughts of it kind of from a recruiting standpoint?
Yeah, so I want the athletic catcher every time. I think the guy that is athletic, the days of the big burly guy behind the plate are kind of getting by the wayside for us, because we ask our catchers to do so much. And with the stuff the pitchers are throwing being so good, now we were talking about it before we got on here. There's 92 to 94 with sink. There's 86-mile-an-hour sliders in college at the Division I level. Like, we got to be able to move back there. So now some pitchers like throwing to the bigger target a little bit more, I think. But on the flip side, on the athletic guy back there, I think that he can do more. He can get in better positions that we're asking him to be in. And on the recruiting side, man, if I go out and I see a high school guy or a junior college guy that's already on that knee down stance and has some feel back there doing it, it does intrigue me a little bit more. Whether than now, if he's on 2 feet and he can really do stuff with the glove and frame the baseball, manipulate it with the catch, hey, he's going to catch my eye. But whenever I see that high school junior that's able to do knee down and manipulate the baseball, yeah, he's going to go up my list a little bit because I know that he's already got a jump start on what I'm teaching. And I've said this a lot, whether it be you're drafting a guy out of college or you're signing a guy out of high school, I think anytime that he already has or is already doing what we want him to do, it makes our life a lot easier, right? So that's definitely something that I look at whenever I'm on the road trying to recruit a catcher.
Well, I definitely thought you were going to say the athletic route, and that's what I kind of thought you were going to say. But like I said, I just think it's important for people to hear out there, because I hear a lot of young, coaches of younger catchers, especially, they say, hey, we got a guy who doesn't move very well back there. I think we're going to put him on a knee. And to me, that's almost kind of like the opposite of what we're trying to do. So I think it's reassuring to hear you say that. But what I really want to talk,
and not to cut you off, but also we're looking for, I'm asking them to get in multiple knee down stances too. There's a different stance with a guy at first base, whether he's a guy that runs really well or if he's a truck over there. So if I have that big burly guy back there and he can't get in different versions of the knee down stance, now we're going to be behind a little bit. So that athletic guy that has really good shin flexion and all that kind of stuff, ankle flexion, can get in different positions, whether than the big burly guy that has to be in the same stance all the time.
That's a great point. And I was going to talk about blocking a little bit next, but I want to kind of touch on a few things you just mentioned. So if you have 5 or 6 catchers on a college staff, how different does their one knee down stance look from each other? Because I think a lot of people, they're looking for a cookie cutter answer. Like, hey, Coach Zan, how do I want to get my guys on a knee? How do I do it? Where do I start? And I feel like it's very individualized in my opinion. But I'd love to know what you think. I mean, if you have 5 different catchers, what are they doing similar? And what are some of the maybe things that might be doing differently for different body types and different athletic styles and so on and so forth?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So we have one guy that's just super athletic and super flexible. So he can almost get on a knee down and put his leg completely out with nobody on base and kind of have that butt almost to the ground. And he's a guy that does a really good job at presenting the bottom of the zone. Now we've had to adjust that a little bit just simply because sometimes the pitcher doesn't like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
If he's a guy that has a heavy fastball and we're sitting way down at the bottom of the zone, maybe it's a tougher target to throw to. But one thing that I like to say is we want to try to keep our chest as square as possible. Sometimes you get in that knee down stance and they want to turn a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to keep our chest centered to the plate. And now I think with nobody on, we can be, our toes can kind of be pointed out a little bit with the leg up. If I want to block, if we're in a block throw stance or a block receive stance, that whatever foot is up, the toe can be pointed out, kind of just natural. Don't really care where it's at. We're just kind of moving side to side, whatever you can do. Now, if we have that rabbit over there at first base that he can steal. Like he's their fastest guy. He's a steal threat. We're going to be right knee down all the time with runners on base. That's just something that I prefer. I think it's easier to block out of. I think it's easier to throw out of. It's an easy coaching cue whenever we're on the right knee to throw, because now I can say take your right foot to where your right knee is when you come up to throw, and it's that quick. Now, not to get off topic, how that stance is now we kind of want to be in that sprinter stance. So that's what I call it. My right knee is down and my left toe is pointing as close to at second base as it possibly can. And what that does is kind of be able to push towards second base to gain that ground a little bit quicker. It's like a sprinter taking off out of the gate. I want to have that toe as much towards second base as I can. Now, if it's pointed out a little bit, because again, some guys don't have the ankle flexion, the shin flexion to be able to do that. So now, if we're pointed out a little bit, we have to cheat the shoulders a little bit more as the pitch comes in. As that pitch comes in, I hear a runner. Now the shoulders turn to be able to start creating that ground to second base. But there's definitely some different stances that we throw in there. The left knee down stance, I'm very free with what they want to do, because that clears up the left elbow. We don't have to worry about that. You kind of be free. If you want that right leg out, you want it tucked up underneath, whatever, that's fine. Whatever feels the most comfortable. It's kind of like that primary stance that we've all been taught. How can you sit there comfortably for hours, right?
Yeah.
Now, the right knee down stance, we have to have that left knee either tucked down or tucked out to be able to have the freedom with the left arm.
So, the things that I take away from that is, yes, there are certain, it's like hitting. Every hitter in a team may have a slightly different stance, but they're definitely the successful guys are going to have certain things in common. And I feel like the knee down stances are the same. So with that said, I would say that I work with a lot of high school guys, and most of the high school guys that I work with, either their coach or their program, that they're not quite as bought into it as you guys are. Okay. So they may be catching still in a traditional stance. So if you get a guy in high school who is caught in a traditional stance and it's brand new to him, what is step one? Do you just say, hey, get down in a position that's comfortable to you? Or do you go ahead and start them in a, I hate to say cookie cutter, but do you start them in a standard stance and then you adjust from there? What's kind of the starting point for somebody who's completely brand new to it?
Yeah. So I say, hey, I'm going to act like I'm throwing you a ball down the middle of the plate. Okay. I want you to get in your blocking stance, your traditional blocking stance. Okay. Now, what a majority of those guys do? They go knees down and they tuck their head. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, perfect. Hold it. Now I'm going to lift their head up, lift their chest up, because it's already kind of over. All right. And I'm going to leave that left knee on the ground and say, hey, put your right foot up wherever it's comfortable. So that's when comfortability comes in there. So you take what they've been taught in their secondary stance to block and now turn that into their primary stance by taking that right foot out and saying, hey, you get comfortable wherever that right foot wants to go. Some guys will stick it straight out. Some guys will tuck it up underneath, whatever, but that's comfortability. And now you can relate that back to now I'm knee down. I have that left knee on the ground. My left arm can have some receiving aspect. I can move the baseball. And that right leg just does whatever it's comfortable doing. And now when you get into the blocking aspect of it later, it's like, all right, you were already there. Now all we got to do is get that knee back down. So it kind of is a full circle mentality there. And I think that's the best. That's what I've found a way to do it is and keep them comfortable.
Well, I'll be honest with you. So I've had this conversation with a lot of people, and that's probably my favorite way that I've heard it described. Kind of working backwards from the blocking stance. I think that's an excellent approach that you've kind of come up with there. And like I said, I don't think maybe somebody else is doing that similar, and maybe they think the same, but I think you're the first person I've heard articulate that. And I think that's a really good way to do it for people out there who are wanting to dive into it and wanting to learn more. So I definitely kind of appreciate you sharing that. And you did kind of, that's kind of a good segue, because you talked about blocking earlier, and I want to talk about blocking out of the knee down stance. One of the things you mentioned was a lot of players may at first not feel like they have enough range until you help them understand what their lateral range is. You mentioned putting bands on guys, or do you use just the regular bands? Are you a fan of the core velocity belt? My buddy Lance is the one who invented that, so I like to plug that when I can. But I was just curious, what specifically are you doing? Assisted with the bands or resistance with the bands? How do you use that?
Yeah, so to start, we have used the core velocity belt a little bit, but sometimes those are being used by hitters and pitchers in our program. I think we have 9 or 10 of them. Sometimes those are in other places, but on the flip side of that, we've used J bands, the Jaeger bands, where they just go around, and I have the two straps on this side, and able to pull them, or just a normal resistance band is fine. So I've hooked that around their waist. And I just say, hey, the perfect place to do it is lay out 5 baseballs like we've always been taught. That point drill that we've all done from the stand up position or the traditional stance. And I say, hey, I'm going to help you get out to this ball that's 2 or 3 balls off the plate. So as they go to push, I say go, and I just pull them, and I just pull, and I just pull. And what that allows them to do is feel that contact point and where they're leveraging the ground. So if I'm right knee down and I'm going to my left, hey, I'm pushing off that knee, right? And they can start to feel that and how that body works. And then from that, now I flip to the other side. So always assisted first and then resisted is a kind of a good segue into, hey, now I'm just taking this off and you get out there. So help them and then pull against them and then say, hey, all right, you got there with me pulling against you. Let's see if you can do it by yourself. And allowing them to see that how far out their range can actually get is something that they'll be shocked. And our guys were shocked. Like I said, I got some pushback on the blocking aspect, and that's where we first started.
I think that's one of the fun things when you work with a player and as a coach, when you see something in your mind, you have this vision of what they're capable of doing, and maybe they're not even aware of what they're capable of doing. And then once you kind of help them get to that point, that's one of the cool parts of coaching, I think.
Yeah, I have a video actually on my computer here of the first time one of our guys did the right knee down stance in the bullpen, and he blocked one because we video all of our bullpens and able to have a competition that way. And he grabs it and he just is pumped, like, the fist pump, that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, there was the aha moment that I can do this, that I can get out there. So that was a very, very cool moment to see that guy succeed in that piece.
No doubt, man. I love talking about the one knee down stance because I feel like there's different guys out there, whether it be you or you mentioned Tanner earlier, or whoever it is. There's guys that are doing, we're trying to accomplish the same thing, but we're going about it in different ways. And, there's some similarities and some differences, but I feel like every time I have a conversation like this, I learn, and I definitely appreciate you sharing what you do. One of the other things that you mentioned earlier that I'm really interested in learning about is you talked about how your catchers work with the umpires and some of the reports. So maybe for the guys who aren't as familiar with, college baseball, or, maybe their son is 10 or 12 years old, you mentioned getting a report on umpires. Would you just kind of first go into a little bit more detail and kind of explain what's happening and what's actually going on?
Yeah. So again, we're very fortunate here at Campbell to have some technology, and we have a TrackMan device that tracks every pitch. It's logged as what pitch it was. We get to see all the metrics on it, but also it's always registered as a called strike, a called ball, or and then it plots it on a strike zone basically. And then we get that report in just a raw data form after the game. And what we do with that is upload it to a system called Baseball Cloud. And it's an application that kind of makes it into usable data. And from there, I can go in and I can pull out umpire reports and see where he called pitches or what his percentage right was against with a right-handed pitcher or a left-handed batter, and kind of have those filters. And that way I can take a screenshot of that on my computer and log that into, hey, this was Joe Schmo, the umpire. Here's what his strike zone was with right-handed pitcher versus right-handed batter, or left-handed pitcher and left-handed hitter. And then take that data, and next time we have them, or if we have them, maybe we don't have them again until the conference tournament or whatever it might be, but maybe we can win 1 or 2 pitches off the plate because we know he likes to call it there. And I think that's something that has allowed us to have more success on the marginal pitches, because we know, hey, we want to cheat to that side a little bit.
And I love hearing that, because I think that's kind of the way things are moving. I mean, the technology is advancing, and like you said, the TrackMans, that technology is expensive. It's not in every ballpark right now, but at some point, it probably will be. You know, I don't know if that's 5 years down the road or 10 years down. Maybe it's 30 years down. I have no idea, but we're definitely moving that direction. And so I love hearing from guys like you who are already using it and already implementing it. And I've been fortunate too. I've had some access to some of the MLB guys, and I've seen their heat maps and how different their heat maps can be. I guess I have it's a two-part question. One, how long have you guys been using that system? Just so I know how much data we have. And then two, after that, how much variance is there in different umpires? I mean, do you find that some umpires are wildly different? Like this guy doesn't call anything off the corners, or this guy has a really wide strike zone. You know, I think as catchers and coaches, we've always kind of assumed that a lot of umpires, you know, they have their own unique zone per se. But now that you actually have the data and you can look at it, you know, charted, do you find that is true? You know, do umpires, are they very unique with their strike zone? And do you feel like you can use that to your advantage?
Yeah. So answer number one is we kind of started doing this a little bit last year. And then at the end of the year, or, you know, that shortened COVID season. And then this year we've been able to do it the whole time. So we've had some guys repeat and able to take, hey, this is the game we had him earlier in the year. This is the game we had him this year, and kind of plot those all together to see, hey, was he similar from game to game? And surprisingly, a lot of them are very similar from game to game. They have their zone or where they see it more, that kind of thing. But one variance that we've kind of had this year that we've kind of seen is umpires are wide side to side, right? We can win side to side. Up and down is kind of, we can win some down at the bottom, but the top is kind of varied depending on the hitter. And maybe the TrackMan doesn't recognize, hey, this guy's 5'8" or this guy's 6'10". Okay, so that's a little variance up and down. Now, in and out, we can win some pitches, and what we've seen a bunch of is away to hitters. We can win a bunch away. Whether it be a left-handed winning glove side or right-hander, and we're going to win extension side as a catcher, we can win that. We can extend that strike zone away a lot. Something else that's we found very interesting on the umpire report, and this is not a knock to umpires, is that sometimes velocity throws them off, right? A guy that's maybe he misses every pitch that's 94 plus. So we've seen some of that a little bit too, where it might be too fast for him. And we've won some pitches away because it's 94 to 95, and he just doesn't call velocity well. So we've seen that, which was surprising to me, but it makes sense.
Man, that's super interesting. And I just think that I would say the turnover in college baseball umpires, it's not like super rapid. It seems like the same guys, you're going to umpire in the same leagues for a long time. So I know you've been doing this for a little over a year, let's call it a year and a half, because last season and this season. But I would imagine that as you do this season and then next season and the following years, you're going to have a mountain of data that's going to be, I don't want to say predictable, but it's going to be very, very useful in your decision making and the way you help your catchers, that way. So I just think that whole,
or who catches, right?
Absolutely.
Or who's back there that game. If we have a guy that's really good to his glove side, and we know that umpire extends that way, hey, let's catch this guy tonight. Or vice versa, he's really good at the low ball. He goes down a bunch. Let's throw our best guy back there that's the best low ball receiver. So being able to kind of use some data. Now we got to get more before we start doing that, but I think that's something that could be done in a year or 2 years, whatever.
But that's definitely the direction it's trending, and I'm with you on that. I think, I don't know if you have enough data yet because you want to make player decisions. Maybe you do and you feel comfortable with it. But I would say absolutely by year 2, 3, 4, 5, when you've had the same umpires in your league for this amount of time and you have that much reference, that's going to be very helpful. So I definitely appreciate you sharing that. And I love hearing where college baseball is going. And I know there's a lot of college, programs that don't have a TrackMan and aren't fortunate, and they're not doing what you're doing. But you guys are doing some really cool things over there. And I love hearing about all of it. When it comes to other technology, you talked about video, and video is probably not as advanced as a technology as a TrackMan and a baseball cloud and that type stuff. But you mentioned how you video every bullpen. And that's something that I find super interesting. And I think to the average person listening to this, that makes a lot of sense. Like, oh yeah, we'll video the bullpens. But when it comes to the real world application of it, it's I hate to say it's a little bit of a pain in the ass, but it's a little bit more of a pain in the ass. It's a little bit more work. But how much benefit do you find from videoing the bullpens versus not doing it?
Yeah, so that's something that we've done here since I kind of took over the catching aspect of things, and we video every catch that our guys make all fall, whether that be in the bullpen or in an inner squad or whatever it might be. And it's not anything fancy. It's a camcorder with a SD card that I can throw into my laptop after there. Okay, it's nothing that expensive. So what I do with that is then I go back and I have a grading chart, and what I do with that is if it's a pitch that I think is a marginal win, so it's a pitch that he made look really good, it's a +2. If it's a strike, he kept a strike, it's a +1. If it's a ball, it's just a 0. If it's a marginal pitch that he lost, it's a -1. And it's just a minus. We lose if you catch one bad and it's not good, it's a -1. And so I tally that up over a week period. So maybe they're catching 5 or 6 bullpens, and then I take, hey, what was their score divided by how many pitches they caught, and that's that's their percentage for the week. All right, and then that becomes a competition over time. Now it's kind of progressed into, now I can see, I write down, was he in left knee down or was he in right knee down? So then I can go back and look at the chart. Not only is it a competition now I can see maybe all of his minuses are right knee down, and it's glove side. So right knee down, glove side, that left leg's up. Maybe he's struggling with that pitch. So yeah, it's time consuming, but in the end, if it helps us win 2 or 3 pitches in a game come springtime, then that's going to help us win. So it's competition, it's grading, it's going over and saying, hey, we can guide our teaching by what you did in the bullpen.
Well, to me, that goes back to one of the things that I mentioned. When we kind of first started talking, people ask, well, I'd love to hear Tyler's story. How has he advanced up the ranks? What's he doing to make a name for himself? And, from the outside looking in, it's doing things like that that's helped make you successful. I know you. I know you're a hard worker. I know you're a great person, but I also now know that you're going to go above and beyond, and you're going to do the things that are maybe a little bit inconvenient, but they're better for your guys. And to me, that's kind of what coaching is all about. It's not about like, hey, I'm going to show up at practice at 2 and I'm going to leave at 5. That's not how you advance. That's not how you make a name for yourself. So I kind of just wanted to give you a little shout out for that, because that's one of those things that I think a lot of people understand and know that it would help their guys be better. But at the same time, they're like, oh man, I got to review 20 bullpens. That's a lot of work and this and that. So I give you a lot of credit for doing that. Because I think it absolutely is helping your guys. And I think that's one of the reasons that you're making such a good name for yourself in the catching world. So I love hearing stories like that because I just think it's helpful. I don't think you need tons of fancy equipment. I think anybody out there can do it. You just have to be willing to do it.
Absolutely. And like I said, it's nothing fancy, and it's even cooler whenever you see a really good catch and you're able to send that into the catcher's group message. Maybe you have a group me, or maybe you have a full message with all 5 or 6 catchers and say, hey, look at this catch. This is how it should be done. Or using, hey, he missed that one. All right, that was a bad catch, and sending that into the group and having them kind of dissect that video and say, hey, what could he have done better? This and that. And then you get feedback from them all. So and again, you got to create that culture that says, hey, they can critique each other, and I'm going to get that feedback, but we all can learn from that.
No doubt. And so it's funny you said culture again, because that word came up earlier, and that was one of the things you kind of spoke about at CatcherCON. I think that was your first presentation at CatcherCON in 2017. I forget which year it was now, 17 or 18. But I think you've done a great job, and you've kind of created an atmosphere around the program, and guys know who the Bulls are. But for maybe people who haven't seen the video, or they're not as familiar with what you're doing, what would a couple of tips be for a coach who's trying to build a catcher or a culture among the catchers? Like I said, I think you've got a lot of really good ideas. I'd love for you to expand on it briefly.
Yeah, so it has to embody what the team culture is. If you're trying to create a culture within a team that doesn't embody what the main team culture is, which at Campbell we're going to say it's a brotherhood that's for each other. Everything we do is for each other. So then, whenever I relate it back to the Bulls, Bulls actually came because a male of the camel herd is called a bull. It's not something that I just pulled out of nowhere. We're the fighting camels, so that's where a bull came. But on the flip side of that, we want to be the guys that are the toughest, the selfless guys back there, the guys that do more for the team. Like a male camel might carry water on his back for other females in the herd. So kind of that mentality of relating the whole culture piece back to that for each other mentality is something that I think is hugely important. Now, with that being said, we create a catcher handbook at the beginning that says, hey, this is who we are. These are our receiving methods. These are our blocking methods. These are our throwing methods. And all of that is related back to the bull standard, kind of that male dominant camel male. And so whenever we can have that brotherhood back there, because again, there's only going to be one guy that catches, one or two guys that catch throughout a year, maybe three. And if we have 5 or 6 on the catching staff, maybe there's a red shirt, maybe there's a freshman who's just paying his dues, that kind of stuff that's in the bullpen. I want that guy to know he's as important as that top guy. And sometimes we forget about those bottom as games get going and we're playing 50 games and it's a Tuesday game getting ready to go on the road on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We got to be able to make sure those guys that are younger are getting better at the same rate that those older guys are. So connecting the older and the younger and kind of creating that culture has been something that's huge. And then you see them, they give each other the bullhorns whenever they come in and out of games and that kind of stuff, which is huge to know that they're doing things back there together because nobody else knows what catchers go through besides a guy that's done it, right? A guy that understands we're going to go to the bullpen, then we're going to go hit, and then we're going to go back to the bullpen. Or maybe I just sit in the bullpen all day and I got to catch 20 of them before I go hit BP. That kind of stuff. So creating that culture, creating that brotherhood, that bond back there between them has been huge.
Yeah, I love that, man. I think you're a testament. I think it's working. I think you're doing a great job. And I think the guys have definitely bought into what you're doing. I do want to circle back around to one thing you mentioned kind of very early when we started talking. And you talked about different styles of the way guys learn and you kind of treat guys individually there. I know that's a big topic that, we could take an entire day to discuss, but what are a couple of things that come to mind first, when you mention, hey, we're going to try to treat our guys individually because they all learn differently. What are some of the highlights or the main bullet points? Where would you kind of start that conversation?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just understanding that you have some guys that can learn from just strictly you telling them, right? Of, hey, I want you to be able to go from extension to flexion and get everything back to your chest when you receive. Or there's some visual guys that you have to show them this is what it looks like and find those pictures online and say, hey, this is Mitch Garver who does this really well. I want you to embody that, or I want you to be able to get in that right knee down stance because that's what it should look like. And then you have some guys that just kind of learn in a mix of different ways. Maybe they learn by doing. So just put them back there and say, hey, figure it out. Right. So, and you get to know those guys. I have not done actually the test to kind of see what type of learner they are. Sometimes our hours and different things get in the way of that. That's something that I want to do in the future is kind of give them a test and kind of see, hey, this is what the test yields, that you're a visual learner, or you're a learn by doing type guy, hands-on learner, kinesthetic learner, that kind of stuff. And I think we'll get to that eventually, but you also get to know your guys and understand what works for them. We're together so much that I'm going to know my visual guys versus my guys that I can just tell. So being able to do that and kind of tier the group setting, the catcher individual off of that, you're going to get the most out of your guys. They're going to learn it if you know how they learn.
Well, and that's a good point. You just mentioned, because there are tests out there, and I don't know the names of them, but there's all sorts of aptitude tests that can tell you what role you'll be good in a corporate setting, what type of learner you are, what are your 5 characteristic type traits, and there's definitely a time and a place for that. I would say as a college coach or even a younger coach, we're probably not capable of, realistically putting players through all these different personality tests. However, you did mention, just from being around guys and just from paying attention, you probably have a pretty good feel of, okay, this guy, he needs to get back there. He needs to feel it, before it really grasps. And this guy, I can show him a picture and he would do it like that, or he can watch a video and do this. So a lot of it is just paying attention. And I definitely think there's merit to guys learn differently. But I just want to kind of reiterate to people listening, like, you don't have to send your guys to a personality type. You don't have to send them to a psychologist or psychiatrist and figure out these minute differences. It's just paying attention to your guys and listening to the feedback they give you and then reacting.
Yeah, just relationship, man. Just understanding that, talking to them, knowing that they can have that general conversation. And it might be a conversation that's not about baseball, right? Or not about catching. Maybe it's a thing about, hey, how'd your classes go today? Well, the teacher just wrote notes on the board. All right, that tells me that he just can't learn by looking at the notes, right? Maybe I got to show him what it looks like. Take those guided clues and use them to your coaching advantage. That's why you got to get to know your guys. You can't just be baseball all the time. Get to know them on a personal level a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. So one of the things that I mentioned at a CatcherCON presentation a couple of years ago, and I swear by it, I think everybody should do it, is I would actually give my catchers homework. And nothing crazy, but I would say, like, hey, the first week, if we cover receiving, let's talk about blocking. Okay. Let's just say blocking. If we're talking about blocking, I would say, hey, I want you to go home, write me a book report. It doesn't need to be 50 pages, but write me your report on blocking. And it was amazing to me that some guys could regurgitate it exactly the way that I related it to them. And that tells me they're an auditory learner, and they would use the exact same terminology, the exact same verbiage. And other guys, it was like that we were speaking a different language. Now, they were saying the same things and they were still correct, but it kind of hit home with me. It was like, okay, this guy doesn't talk about, glove side or arm side. He talks about right and left. So that gave me a clue that when I'm talking to him, I need to say right or left. This guy might need to say glove side or arm side. And that helped me learn how certain guys communicate. And it also helped me learn what guys really had a grasp of the concepts and which guys didn't. So that was an exercise that I thought was very beneficial. So that's my experience with that. And I think it's helpful. It's not hard. You just ask your guys to, hey, if you were teaching a 10-year-old how to block or how to receive or how to get in a knee down stance, what would you tell them? And whether they give a live presentation to the other catchers or they give you a written or typed out report, just listening to how they speak and listening to how they communicate, I think is very helpful.
Yeah, there's some days where I'll just feed the machine and we're receiving or whatever, and maybe we're videoing it that day. But I'll go back and listen to the audio of that video because I want to hear what they're saying back there. Not just me feeding. Like I'm not coaching them that day. I'm just feeding the machine, letting them work on receiving. And then you hear certain guys talking to the other ones like, hey, you made that pitch look really good, or hey, you need to extend more to get back in, or whatever it might be. So you hear their coaching cues to each other, and then you use those on themselves.
I think that's fantastic, man. I think that's a great idea. And that's just another added benefit of video and reviewing and putting the time in and getting in the weeds and doing the things that we all know would be helpful, but we don't necessarily always take the time to it. So I appreciate you sharing that. The next question or kind of topic I want to speak to you about, and I don't mean to shift too rapidly, but I feel like you are a forward thinker, and I feel like you think outside the box a little bit. And I mean that I mean that in a positive way. What would be some of the things you see maybe changing in the future, or what's the direction you see catching going? If I had asked you 6 or 7 years ago, I don't think anyone would have predicted that everybody in the big leagues and every college player are all switching to a knee down stance. So that's changed rapidly. If you had to predict, and again, I hate to put you on the spot, but if you had to predict, where is the catching world going? Do you think it's getting better? Do you think it's getting worse? Do you think things will continue to evolve? Just what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's already evolving to the body type that we want back there. And I think the more that we see, the more that the athletic guy is going to get back there. The maybe the trend could go to, hey, we're gonna this middle infielder that has really good hands, we're gonna put him behind the plate because now we need this guy that has some feel with the glove, and can pick and do different things back there. I think it might trend that way, and it already has in the professional ranks a little bit of converting infielders or converting whoever to a catcher. But in the college level, that hasn't been done as much. So I think maybe we'll recruit a guy in the near future that's a middle infielder and say, hey, this guy might be all right behind the plate. So kind of that trend going that way. And I'll just go ahead and say it. I think at some point in my coaching career, we're going to have left-handed throwing catchers back there. Like I just think that it could happen in baseball. Like it's one of those things that stolen bases are going down. People don't run as much. Pitchers are quicker to the plate. Like, why wouldn't we put a lefty back there? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think that it's a trend that in 5-6 years it could be there. If he's a elite receiver that can block, hey, let's put him back there and see what happens.
And I love that you say that, because you kind of got to go out on a limb. That's a little bit different than what most people think. And I've kind of thought the same thing for a little while myself. I kind of have a passion project. I want to find a young left-handed catcher somewhere in the country, I don't know where, who's 10, 11, or 12, and they're going to stop catching because somebody tells them you can't catch anymore because you're left-handed.
Yeah.
And I kind of put my hand on them and try to help guide them through the process, because I would love to see that happen. It hasn't happened in a long time, but I think the door's open. I think it can definitely happen for the reasons you mentioned too.
And softball, you see it in softball,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you see why is baseball that much different? So I think eventually, I'm going out on a limb and saying at some point it might happen.
Yeah. Well, and I hope it does. I'd love to see that. The other thing that you kind of mentioned was body type, and I thought it was really interesting. Spring training, which in case somebody's watching this in the future, we're in the middle of spring training right now. Every year at spring training, it seems like there's a couple stories. This guy came back 25 pounds overweight. This guy came back in great shape. So far this year, I've seen a couple of stories where Christian Vasquez and I think Gary Sanchez and a couple other guys in the big leagues have just really impressed people with their body transformation. And they've, gone from being which none of those guys are, obese and completely out of shape by any means,
Right.
But they've really made an emphasis on transforming their body and trying to become more athletic and improving their mobility so that they can be better in these knee down stances, and they can block and they can throw and they can just be more athletic back there. And we see that at the highest levels. I would say it's maybe slowly trickling down into the amateur levels, but I don't think it's where it needs to be yet. When I talk to college guys, I think they have a little bit better understanding that, yes, I got to take care of my body. I need to be in shape. I need to be able to move. When I talk to high school guys and even younger, that seems to be blunt, it seems to be a lot lower on their priority list. So I would love to see guys, start taking a little bit more active role and just becoming more athletic and moving better and improving their body composition.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. Again, I talk about ankle flexion and shin flexion and all that kind of stuff a lot. Again, we're fortunate to have a strength conditioning coach here at Campbell, who's really good and understands the knee down stances. So he knows what our catchers need to be able to get into that. So he has a set of drills and a stretching routine and a foam rolling machine routine to get through that. So they know, like, hey, this is how I'm going to improve that. And on the flip side of that, we had a catcher, a 4-year guy here between years 3 and 4, like just transformed his body. And I think a lot of that had to do because he knew that we were going to be in the knee down stances, and he knew he needed to get more athletic. So, hey, he leaned out a bunch, he put on some muscle, flipped his body comp, diet became hugely important to him. He got in better shape, and now he's a better catcher because of it. And I think that flipped his whole game a little bit.
I love hearing that, and I feel like we need more stories like that. I feel like they're definitely out there, but I feel like not enough light is shined on the stories like that. So I definitely appreciate you sharing. To talk specifics for just a minute, you talk about ankle mobility and flexibility. I've for a long time I've talked about ankle and hip. I've probably put more emphasis on hip than the ankles, but if you could briefly describe the routine, and I know you said your strength coach, puts them through it, but do your guys, is this something they do every day before practice? Do they do it after practice as a cool down? If you wouldn't mind just going into a little bit more detail, I think a lot of people listening could really benefit from that.
Yeah, so they do a lot of foam rolling and band stretches with the foot and ankle, and being able to make sure the calf is definitely foam rolled, because again that transfers directly to the shin, and so we don't have shin splints and all that, to make sure that that kind of foot can get back and turn in different ways. And just the it's 3 or 4 times a week. Again, we're fortunate to have that guy here a lot, and we have the strength wagon now, the strength trailer that has all the things in it right here in our bullpen, so our guys can get done, or maybe they're in between bullpens and they just want to go out there and get another foam roll in, or some flexion and flexibility mobility work. But it's 3 or 4 times a week, and taking care of their bodies is something that we put a lot of emphasis on.
Now, you just mentioned the strength wagon. I got to bring this up. In case anybody who's listening to this hasn't seen the strength wagon, you got to follow Tyler immediately on Twitter and Instagram and go check that thing out. I don't know when the last time you posted it was, but the first time I saw it, I was like, holy crap, this is the coolest thing ever. It's basically a trailer that you guys can take with you on the road, and it's a portable weight room, right? I mean,
yeah, so it's a portable weight room. I think it's got 600 pounds on it or something crazy that lugs around, and just in barbell weight. So that doesn't even count the kettlebells and different things. So it folds out into 4 different racks: squat racks, deadlift racks, all bumper plates. So if you need to clean or you need to drop weight or whatever it may be, it's all out there, and it's awesome, man. Like I said, we go to UNC Asheville this weekend. We're going to pull it to the mountains with us, and our strength coach is going to drive the truck and trailer, and the staff will get a lift in on Friday morning in the hotel parking lot, and then our pitchers and people can use it once we get to the field, to make sure they're ready for their next start and things like that.
Well, I tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and look at your schedule as soon as we get off this call. And I need a day pass for the strength wagon. I want to come get a lift in with you guys.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know if it'll be at home or on the road or what, but I got to check that thing out in person because it looks awesome.
Yeah. Come on out, man. It's awesome, man.
So now I hate to turn this into a plug, but I'm just really impressed with what you guys are doing, what you're doing specifically with the catchers, but what your program is doing as well. I know for a fact that if I were a parent of a high school player, I would have absolutely no issue sending my son to Campbell to come play for you and play for the other coaches as well, because I love what you're doing. Facility wise, you guys have done a phenomenal job. You got the strength wagon. I feel like you're really forward thinking with the catchers. You guys have had some, a lot of success in the past. I wish you nothing but success in the future, but I've been really impressed with what you guys are doing, and just wanted to kind of throw that out there in case maybe somebody's not familiar with your program, or maybe they live on the other side of the country and they've never seen photos or videos, but you guys have a lot of really cool things going on. And I'm definitely happy to see you guys' success. You guys deserve it. And like I said, it's just really cool watching you guys.
Yeah. I think our program has been on the rise, since Coach Hare took over 7 years ago. It's gotten continuously better. And I feel good about where we're at. We're very fortunate to have the administration that we do that kind of backs us. And again, we have a bunch of forward thinkers on our staff. We hired 3 new guys this past summer: Jordan Stampler, Wes Hunt, Adam Wise, all coaches that have been in different places. And now they're here kind of breaking down more of the analytics and working with our guys. And we call their office, they have an office together, and we call it the Nerd Cave. And they help just as much with the hitting and the fielding as they do with the catching aspect, and being able to put those data points into Baseball Cloud and make them into usable data for me to be able to break down our catchers. Now, again, fortunate to have those folks with us and those resources, but again, just tells you how much Campbell baseball is on the rise and forward thinking and that sort of deal.
Well, to me, this is just a foresight of what baseball is becoming. Like I said, I feel like you guys are, I feel like you're advanced in the game. I feel like you guys are ahead of a lot of schools. But I think in 5 or 10 years, a lot more programs and schools and organizations are going to have access to these things as they become more affordable and as there's more data available. But you guys are doing it right now, and I definitely look forward to to watch you guys this season in the future, and watch how you stay at the edge of what's available.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. It's trending in the right direction, that's for sure.
No doubt. Tyler, man, well, I've absolutely had a blast on this podcast. Like I said, I know you guys, you're in the middle of season, and I'm sure you got a ton of office work and probably got to go recruit and watch a game tonight since you guys aren't playing. But I appreciate the time you spent with us. I'm going to put your contact info on the screen so everybody can be sure to follow you and follow Campbell Baseball. But, man, I've had a blast. I've learned a lot. I definitely enjoyed it. And, man, I hope you guys have a great season, and hopefully we can talk again soon.
Yeah, Xan, I appreciate it, man. You've helped me a bunch with getting me on the stage at CatcherCON and kind of opening, my Twitter up and Instagram and allowing me to meet the guys that are in pro ball with Tanner Swanson and Tom Griffin and the Godfather of Jerry Weinstein, and being able to meet those guys and shake their hand and put a name with the face. Things I wouldn't have been able to do if I didn't speak or I didn't come to CatcherCON. And so I appreciate that. I appreciate you having me on here, and obviously thanks for the nice words, man.
Nah, man, no problem at all. And I think you kind of summed up the catching community in a nutshell. Call it catching Twitter, call it catching community, whatever you want. It seems like people are just open to share, and it's a good group of guys and a lot of smart people and good coaches. But at the end of the day, it's a lot of really good guys. And I definitely appreciate you saying that. But like I said, I will let you go, man. I have enjoyed the conversation. I can't say that enough. Wish you guys the best of luck. And like I said, let's plan on talking again soon. And let me get a lift in the strength wagon.
Hey, let me know whenever you're headed down, man. I appreciate it.
You got it, man. Talk to you soon.